Welcome to ZOOMERTIMES TV, and here's your host, Anita Finley.
Hello, everybody. Here I am, Anita Finley. I have another extraordinary guest. I just pride myself on the experts that we're able to bring to you, not only locally, but across the country. And Dr. Michael Browder is actually, and I just wanted to say this again, Dr. Browder is a psychologist, but he's not the kind of psychologist that you think you go to an office and he wants to find out everything about you. What he's going to do is he's going to talk about attitude. And he has a new book that he's come out with, and the book is called Positive Attitude Training. So welcome to our show, Dr. Browder.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
You know, this is interesting. And my first question is, do you have to learn how to have a positive attitude, or is that something inside you, like an optimist or someone who is always positive?
Well, both. Your attitudes are inside of you, and that's the good news, because so many people think that in order to be successful or in order to get what you want or have the relationship you want or whatever, that you need luck, you need somebody to do this or somebody to do that, or a connection. But the great thing about an attitude is that our attitudes live under our skin, and we can pick our attitude and learn with a few little strategies. We can learn how to have the attitude that we want. And once you learn how to do that, then practically everything is possible.
That's a very good point. And of course, I think we all know people who are pessimistic and then optimistic. And I know that there's always a reason, and I always go back to their upbringing. Really, maybe I'm wrong, but you as a psychologist, can't you tell right away when you have patients that come in to your sessions, what kind of attitude they have? And my second question is, can you really change that attitude to be positive?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the second part of your question is absolutely, you can change it. And many times that's all that has to happen, because when you have an attitude, when you have a can-do attitude, when you have an attitude of self-confidence is really the secret sauce of success. In fact, I'm writing an Insight right now where I'm making that point. One of my weekly insights that I send to members of my online community. But if you have confidence in yourself, then at the very, very least, you can achieve success by the best definition of success that there is, which is, a lot of people think success depends on outcome, okay? And the tricky part is that outcome is one thing that often is not under your control, okay? I was just talking the other day to a very, very successful restaurateur who had come up with this incredibly good idea for another restaurant, put a ton of money into it, did all the right things, and then a little thing, obscure little thing called COVID came along, and guy lost an absolute fortune, and this restaurant won't open anytime soon. Okay. But here's the thing. He considers himself, he does not consider it a failure, because he did his best and all the things were in place, but there were certain things that he couldn't control. So the first rule about getting this the way you want it to be is to understand that you have the power. That the power isn't in the lucky people, the rich people, the people who happen to be in the right place at the right time. When you have an attitude consistent with success, and you do your best, by definition, you're success. Then you have to also accept the fact that we can't always pick the outcome. And by the way, that's one of the ways that when we look at successful people, we're seeing them, we're seeing an outcome, and we're giving them credit for the part of the whatever it is that they're successful at. We're giving them credit for the part that they had the least to do with, okay, which is the outcome. Think about that.
So my guest is Dr. Michael Browder, who is giving us some very important information. For those of you who, of course, have been affected by COVID and other negative situations, this is an important interview. Try to get even just one very special tidbit. I'll call it a tidbit or a glimmer of something that you can hang on to. And I'm really happy that at this time in our lives that someone like Dr. Browder has taken the time to do this, because everybody needs, even if you're successful, you need that kind of that energy from somebody who's been around doing this a lot of times. So Dr. Browder, before I let you talk again, I do have a question. There are, I think it's maybe been 5 years, maybe longer, you'll know. There are people who call themselves coaches. And I was thinking that they then try to help people to find out what they want to be, or they want to try to give them direction. How does that differ from a psychologist like you?
Well, coaching, first of all, psychologists who do their job right, I'll just leave it at that because not all of them do. But psychologists who do their job correctly are doing coaching. I mean, if you're treating somebody for anxiety or depression, for example, and you're able to you're able to help them get relief from anxiety or the anxiety or depression, the question is, okay, now what? Now that you're not depressed, what are you going to do with your life? Now that you're not anxious, what risks are you willing to take? What are you willing to do to get out of your comfort zone? And so coaching that's really what coaching is about. And I can tell you that I never learned any of that stuff in my doctoral program, which I took in the 70s. They didn't talk about that at all. It was all about, the DSM diagnosis and then doing this and working that and working this through and in many cases you would be breeding dependency because the person who came to you would think that if it were not for you, you're the one that got him out of the hole. You're the one that dug him out of the hole. The reality is that you can help somebody dig themselves out of the hole. But then if you really want to finish the job, you've got to teach them. You've got to teach them what they need to do to stay out of the hole. So I look at my job as my job's to put myself out of business. Okay, my job is to make myself unnecessary.
Well, I think with and that's really what your book is, positive attitude training, that you are going to get them and help them with a positive attitude if they don't have one now. And then you're going to train them as to what it means and what else they have to do. And I see you've written a lot of other books on that. And also, and maybe we won't be able to do it at this interview, but I think that you also deal in the sexual aspects because if you don't have a positive attitude, how can you enjoy sex, right? It's always going to be other problems. But let's go back to this a minute. So you're in Philadelphia. You said you do teach one class, but you really have a very large client list. But when do you have time to write your books?
Oh, well, well, to me, believe it or not, now I'm 75 and most of my friends are retired and they play golf, they play tennis, now it's pickleball, they travel, they do all those kinds of things. And I do a little bit of that too, but I would much rather write. I love to write. To me, it energizes me, and there's another benefit that it gives me as well, because when you work as a psychologist, as long as I have, 45 years now, when you work as a clinical psychologist, you really have a front row to the theater of humanity. Okay, you get to see the people. You get to see people like nobody else sees them, even the people closest to them. You get, and you're taking all this stuff in. Okay, and my writing and my audio programs and interviews like this, for example, helps me to kind of do something with that material, and my last year I was in graduate school. A very disturbing study came out that showed that male psychologists died 7 years before the average male, and that kind of disturbed me. There were very few women who practice psychology then. Now I think, in the program I teach in, there are far more women than men. But in those days, women were not studied with this. But I became obsessed with why is that so, and I realized because I realized that it had to do a lot with attitude. That, for example, empathy is a very good thing, but if you empathize emotionally, you're going to, you're going to walk away with a lot of poison in your emotional system, and so you need to learn how to protect yourself against that. Not only in my field, but in many fields. Some of the best teachers have to learn that skill, or attorneys, or people that work in a retail store that enjoy talking to their customers that come in all the time. And it's a matter, so I've defined empathy as kind of knowing how the other person feels. But unless it's somebody very close to you, I mean, I'll put my wife, my children, my grandchildren on that list, and close friends. I don't want to feel it with them. I want to understand it so I can help them. They don't need me to sit and cry with them in a session. They need me to help them to, they need me to be objective so I can sit back and really help them to put things into the perspective that's going to, for example, if they've got a wound, turn it into a scar, okay? Which is another way of saying, I mean, we don't forget about, there are many things, our most hurtful parts of life we don't forget about, and we don't want to. I mean, when you forget about certain things, we got a word for that too. It's called dementia. Okay, we don't want to forget about it, but we want to be able to talk about it and think about it without causing pain. And just like a scar, you know, when I was younger, I played a lot of sports, and I got about a half a dozen scars on my body. You know, they don't hurt me anymore, but they're still there. Okay.
That's a good example. You know, it's funny you should say that, because that's the thing, learning how to turn it off. You accept what you can, you help. And I'll just relate something. I was watching Downton Abbey for, I know, months. And all of a sudden I realized I don't want to watch that anymore. That's a lot of pain and bad and good. I don't need that in my life. I think it's beautiful. The music's beautiful, the characters, but that's not what I have in my life, and I don't want to watch it. So it's kind of like you're faced with things and you have to deal about it. And that's called attitude. I think that you have to know yourself and what you can do. But the training part, I know a lot of other people, whom I do know people who do suffer from depression because they can't turn things off. They live with their childhood memories, which were problems, and for someone to say, well, just forget it. No, you can't. So that's where you come in.
Yeah, and by the way, that there are so many power tools today that we didn't have even 20 or 30 years ago, or 10 years ago, to help with trauma. And you know, Freud, for example, had people coming to psychoanalysis 5 days a week or 4 days a week for 20 years, and you know, almost indefinitely. And a lot of those people, I saw people that were in therapy that long and came in and were still traumatized. They talked about it, obsessed about it. And you could have the most terrible childhood in the world, but what the problem really is PTSD, you know, which we've really learned so much about how to work with, and we can do in weeks what it would take decades to do back then, and better, because we get right to the heart of the matter, and then get people to go out and do things with that new power, because that's how you lock it in. When you, you know, just having a good attitude doesn't finish the job. Having a good attitude gives you the impetus to be able to then do things that you wouldn't do otherwise. But unless you do things, you're going to go back to the way things were. And so that's why one of the phrases I'm known for is that the least important hour of your week is the hour that you're spending with me. You know, might be the most expensive hour of your week, but it's least important. It's the other 167 hours where you're going out and doing something with it, and that's what locks this stuff in.
So I want to tell everybody that you've been listening to a very brilliant psychologist, Dr. Michael Browder, who wrote Positive Attitude Training. How can people buy your book or your tapes or discs or whatever you have on the market? Will you tell people that?
Well, I have a website, drmichaelbrowder.com. It's actually, you could also access it through just michaelbrowder.com, but it's Michael, BRODER.com. I have tons of free stuff on there too, by the way. But my latest book is Positive Attitude Training, and I have another one called 7 Steps to Your Best Life, which I'm working on an online course for now, which will be launched in the next couple of months. And by the way, if you go to my website, you can sign up, and you will hear about that. I'm going to be doing some free webinars on it. I even have a free mini course that uses this particular technique that that we call stage climbing, to not only resolve certain problems, but to put your life in a certain perspective. Because I know I work with a lot of people in our age group too, you know, and one of the things that comes up a lot for you know, for seniors is they'll look at certain things with regret. You know, how did I get into this first marriage? How did I do this? How did I do that? Why did I drop the ball when it came to spending more time with my kids? Why did I, you know, and one of the answers to that, and of course it all comes down to attitude, but one of the answers to that is that a lot of times you're looking at it through hindsight, and too many people confuse hindsight with insight. You know, insight is great. Insight's a learning experience. Okay, so if I'm driving my car and I get into a little fender bender, the insight is, you know, I should slow down faster before I come to a light. That's the insight, okay? And that's healthy. The hindsight is, I should have never gone this direction. I should have never done this. I should have never done that, okay? Well, you know, that's not an option, because the one thing we cannot do is, you know, it's like if I take my pen and drop it, you can give me $100 billion and I can't undo that act. Say, okay, but I can learn from the experience. I don't know what I'd learn from that experience, but I can learn. I can learn from almost any experience something that is going to make me a better person, give me the tools to cope with it better in the future, and to stop and to not put myself down. The second you put yourself down, you have just opened the floodgates for everything negative to come in.
I can see why you are so successful. You have such a nice way of sharing what you know, and I can see why people, yeah, and I haven't read your book yet, but which I hope to do, but I just have to say that psychologists have really, over the years, some of them have had their own personal problems, and people will say, why do psychologists have all these problems and they're trying to help me? I said, well, they're because they're human beings, you know, that's why, but they have training to help other people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a very interesting point with that. There used to be a school of thought that said that you can't help somebody with a problem that you haven't resolved yourself. And that concept's been studied, and it's not true. What you really need to do is know, if you're working in my field, whether you're whether you're a mental health professional, psychiatrist, psychologist, clinical social worker, counselor, or even, a coach who's not necessarily a mental health professional. Okay. You need to know what your issues are and just keep them out of the room. You don't have to. You can be depressed and help somebody with depression. You can be anxious and help somebody with anxiety, but you have to know what that is. You have to know what your issues are so that you don't contaminate the process. The other thing too that we've always been fighting is the betrayal of mental health professionals. Very rarely, I would say 90% of the time, whenever you see therapy or mental health professionals portrayed in the movies or on television, they're always way crazier than the person that they're treating. Okay. So that's a kind of something that we've and then the ones that you read about the ones you read about the newspaper. You're reading about them because they did something where they deserved that scorn. Okay, but the work we do is very quiet and deliberate and scientific now, and there's no excuse for walking around with pain. There are free resources practically everywhere. There are self-help resources. But the only thing that you have to do the work.
Dr. Browder, I have to tell you, we have just run out of time, and I don't want to. Then maybe we can have you on again. You are quite a wonderful guest, and I have so many questions, but I know our readers and our viewers, because they're going to be reading in Boomer Times a little bit about you. So thank you. I appreciate you taking your time. You're really a very wise man, and sounds like you have accomplished a lot. And so we do thank you, and we're going to say goodbye now, and then Dan's going to say hello. So just stay with us. Goodbye, everybody. I hope you enjoyed Dr. Browder.
Thank you for having me.